And the referee again checking his watch. And there it goes! The final whistle!
Carlo Corazon will wait inside the box for this from Martin Nash. And a header on it there, and that might have been it. That is a goal for Canada. The header was at Jason deVos.
One last chance for Canada. Sophie Schmidt takes a deflection. Matheson is down the goal. The wins bronze for Canada.
Qualified for World Cup '86, defeating Honduras by a score of 2-1 here in St. John's, Newfoundland this afternoon.
Hello and welcome to the Canada Soccer Nation podcast. My name is Jason deVos and I'm the Director of Development at Canada Soccer, and I'll be the host of this podcast. In the weeks and months ahead, we're going to be exploring the world of grassroots soccer in Canada. We'll discuss the common challenges faced by soccer organizations from coast to coast. We'll provide insight into the work that Canada Soccer is doing to overcome those challenges. And we'll speak with people across the country who are meeting these challenges head on. We'll profile some of the great work that's being done by clubs, by coaches, by administrators, and by match officials so that others can benefit from their experiences. I won't be doing this alone, of course. I will be joined on the podcast, remotely and by practicing physical distancing, of course, by Brad Fougere, Digital and Corporate Communications Manager with Canada Soccer. Brad, welcome to the first episode of the Canada Soccer Nation podcast.
Jason, it's happened. The time has arrived.
Yeah, this is not a new concept for us. We've been talking about doing this for months, if not years.
It's been a while. It has been a while for sure. No, it's exciting.
Yeah, the day is finally here, and I'm excited about the discussions that we're going to have with people across the country, because one of the benefits of the work that we do is we get to travel the country to work with and support people working at the grassroots level, either through coach education, player development, or club licensing. And what I've learned in recent months, in recent years, is there's some phenomenal work being done from coast to coast. And I'm excited about profiling those people and speaking with them and hearing their stories and learning from them. It's going to be a pretty exciting journey. Like most of the staff at Canada Soccer, you have a long-standing relationship with the beautiful game. We met several years ago. I think I was in an airport somewhere, and you called me, and you wanted to write a blog, and we had a pretty lengthy conversation. But tell us a little bit about your backstory with football. Tell me the Brad Fougere story.
Well, I'll keep it quick. I remember that day very well. I was struggling to sort of find my feet in coaching. I was working at the grassroots at the game at the time. I had been a coach for a while, basketball, football, had returned to soccer, which had sort of been my love since I was a kid. I'd played sort of in the community stream, as we would call it today, throughout my life, and refound my love for the game and decided to bring some coaching experience that I'd had in other sports and start to give back to the game, and was really looking at the potential of being a professional coach, I say, quote unquote, but deriving an income from the game. And this was more than a decade ago now. And the struggle was real. And so, we had a great conversation and had conversations previous to that online. I was passionate about the game. I was passionate about being a coach. I was passionate about finding my feet and finding a path. And I, as many coaches in the Canadian soccer community have found over the years, found an ear, to sort of walk through some of the struggles that I've had. So probably my most excitement on this podcast is getting to sort of be a fly on the wall of those conversations that you have with people, because you and I have these chats very frequently about what you're hearing, on the ground. And so to be here and to be able to hear those conversations firsthand is what I'm most looking forward to here.
Yeah, well, we've got a great guest lined up for episode 1. We'll be speaking a little later on with Stuart Neely, the manager of coach education at Canada Soccer, about his backstory, how he got to where he is in the game, and obviously the work that he's doing in Canada Soccer right now as we, navigate an unprecedented situation. In my lifetime, I'm old, but I'm not that old, but in my lifetime, I've never experienced anything like this. And it's been a real challenge, I think, for everyone involved in the game at all levels, trying to figure out how to stay connected through this process. Canada Soccer has done some great work in other departments, in other areas around connecting people to the game while we're not on the pitch playing. Tell us a little bit about Canada Soccer Nation Inside. What work is being done right now? What's already happened? What can people catch up on at Canada Soccer Nation Inside?
Yeah, for sure. When the cancellation and suspension of sanctioned soccer in Canada took place, we, as a marketing and communications team, and really as an organization, needed to look at the way we were communicating with people and the way that we could keep people connected through the game, through these trying times. So we launched Canada Soccer Nation Inside, sort of a riff on our strategic plan that we launched a year and a bit previous, to ensure that we were, doing what we can to bring the most relevant information from public health authorities to coaches, players, families, staff at clubs and provincial associations. So that's incorporated many things, including the Men's Excel 101 seminar that John Hordman and his staff hosted a few weeks back. Will culminate in another 102 course/seminar that takes place May 2nd, that anyone out there can register for online via canadasoccer.com through our Canada Soccer Nation Inside. But really, it just incorporates the many things that the soccer community is doing. We're trying to shine a light on the good work that's happening across the club and provincial and territorial association system to keep people engaged. So we see your Zoom meetings, we see your toilet paper challenges, and we're doing the very best that we can to sort of connect everyone to what it is that you're doing to stay fit and stay involved in the game at this trying time.
One of the things that we're doing across the country, we're obviously not traveling right now and not encouraging anyone to do so, but we're meeting more and more often with people online. And it's that connection that I think is one of the things that people are really missing by not being on the pitch with their friends, being able to play the game. But it's great to see how organic clubs have taken to connecting with their players. Who would have imagined 2 months ago, even 1 month ago, that clubs would be running online training sessions for their players and connecting them. And it's been really great to see. You mentioned there the webinar that John Herdman did, the Men's Excel 101. If you haven't had a chance to see that yet, please seek it out on canadasoccer.com. It's a great insight into the work that John and the staff are doing in the Men's Excel program. And there will be one upcoming from Kenneth Heinemuller and the women's program. So stay tuned for that. It'll be really exciting. And these are the kind of touch points that I think a unique circumstance, a crisis like this always provides an opportunity. And this is an opportunity for people to get a better insight into what's being done at the national team level, which you and I are very privileged to see on a daily basis. And hopefully the rest of the country can now get some insight into that as well. So very good. Excellent. I want to get to the conversation with Stewart Neely as quickly as we can here, because if it's anything like the daily conversation Stewart and I have, it's very likely to go well over time and not going to fit into any kind of a time frame. So after the break, we're going to chat with Stewart Neely and talk about coach education from coast to coast at every level of the game in Canada. Welcome back to the Canada Soccer Nation podcast. My name is Jason deVos, and I'm very pleased to be joined by our first guest on the podcast, Mr. Stuart Neely, the manager of coach education at Canada Soccer. Stuart, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thanks, Jason, for the invite, and obviously to Brad and yourself for putting this together. I guess it only gets better from here.
You were voluntold to be on the podcast as the first guest, I think. Probably the best way to put it.
Thank you for that.
The last month has been an incredible sequence of days blending into weeks, blending into a month. I sometimes don't know what day it is. It's just been so quick and rapid. But we'll talk about the the work that you're doing now to transition everything to an online delivery in a second. But I wanted to start at the beginning for you and give you an opportunity to tell people what your story is. Why football? Why did you fall in love with the game? When did you fall in love with the game? And what's your background with respect to football?
Well, how much time did you say we had on this?
I know we're never gonna get this in 15 minutes.
No, I don't. Maybe not. Well, I'll keep it. I'll keep it brief. When I was one, no, just kidding. I mean, I would think I was introduced to it naturally, originally from Scotland. So you kind of grow up with the game and the people around you. So it was always part and parcel of every day, from kicking stones and marbles to tennis balls to lawn bowling, where I broke my first toe from trying to kick one of those and realizing no, that's not right. So I've come by it honestly, and I get that from my father, who was involved himself, never played, but he coached, and he coached a semi-pro team in the region where we lived. So I was always around it. I was always in the dressing room, on the fields, and apologies for those that have played that I've played with and against, and that's where it started. As much as your common bond together to get me to stop playing, yeah, no, that never happened. But that's kind of where it all started, and so it's a deep rooted passion, but I keep that. I keep that to myself. I keep it quiet, but I do in the right environment with colleagues. It sneaks out every now and then, and I enjoy working with people.
You're one of the most fiercely patriotic, I think is a good way to put it, Canadians that I know. But you weren't born in this country. You were born in Scotland. And when did you come to Canada, and when did you fall in love with this country? What was it about Canada that you fell in love with?
I came July 1981. So I was I was 12 at the time, or turning 12, somewhere in there, and when I got to Canada, I was amazed. I'd never been on a plane. I'd been across Europe, but we had done the trains, automobiles, and a ferry across the English Channel to do a travel, and that was it. So to get chucked onto this plane, and I might add, kicking and screaming. So apologies to the security staff at Prestwick Airport. When we arrived in Canada, it was just, everything was enormous. Like I was in utter shell shock at that age. So I do feel for anyone that is coming to Canada from elsewhere to see the size of this country. It can be overwhelming, but there was just so many other things to do when I got here. I just didn't know where to begin. So it's like opening up the doors to a chocolate factory and letting kids go wild. I thought, oh my God, look at this. So it was just, there was sun, and then I fell upon winter, and I thought, oh no, I'm not having this. This is awful. And then there was more sun, which was few and far between in Scotland, albeit it was a beautiful place, a beautiful country, and yes, it is where I was born. So my fierce patrioticness, I think, stems from there. But I live here now. Canada has given me everything. So I promote that, and I want everyone to be Canadian and to feel Canadian and to accept everything around us as Canadian. It doesn't matter what it is. We live here, so let's enjoy it and let's work together enjoying it.
What about your playing background? At which levels did you play at? What was the highest level you reached? And when did you realize that a playing career wasn't going to be your career?
It was when everyone else told me. You thought about getting into woodwork. What? Just give me the ball. No, I think. My highest level for me was university, and then Ontario Soccer League and Monteleone. Those days were exciting for me, and
that's a decent standard, though. Back then, that was a good standard.
It was a good league. I'll say that it was a good league, yeah. A good team. How I got on it, I'll never know. But the game has helped me, and it's given me an awful lot to be thankful for. The people I've met, the people that I've learned from, even just playing the game and understanding and watching them. And watching them grow around me, and what I mean, not around me to learn, but just around the game, and me being observant of that. And there's so many good people involved in that, including referees, and at the same time, I give a shout out to the refs. There were so many characters involved in the game at so many levels, and I had the opportunity to use that. The British Services League at that time, I was playing. I was a bit of a skelf when I came to Canada, but my dad dragged me around all over the place, play here, play there, and I was never one to really move, because I'd been with one team in Scotland for the entire time, which wasn't that long, but you kind of have this loyalty to what you're doing. But it was obviously, you get thrown into the British world in another country, and I thought that there's other ways to experience the country. So I moved around within the footballing sort of structure at that time, but it was Ontario Soccer League, the British Services League, and then off to university. I went in the States at that time to play. So it was a variety of things, and I made my way throughout the summer to pay for university, and on a scholarship, but it was the full scholarships at that time were few and far between, and I was limited in what I could do. And as my dad used to tell me, son, you're smashing, but when you win the ball, give it to somebody who can play. I was like, thanks, Dad.
Yeah. So it was your dad that told you weren't going to make it as a player.
Yeah, I started with him, and it just seemed to ooze through the community.
So you obviously get to a reasonably high level of play, but the option to play professionally is few and far between for most players. But when did you make the decision to become a coach, and what was that first experience with coaching like for you?
It was a challenge, because I didn't really know if I wanted to do it, and it was somebody who somewhat inspired me at the time, because of the things that they stuck to, their morals, their ethics. And it was a gentleman by the name of Sharif Tufik, and an Egyptian coach, and he had a heart of gold. And he looked after everyone, picked players up, and everything that everyone does. But I'd never seen this before, because really where I came from, it was you get to where you're going on your own, and you might meet up with someone along the way on the bus or on your bike or on your walk. You always just kind of congregated at certain spots to go to your game and or training. But this guy went out of his way to help people, and he helped me because I have a mischievous side to me. I have an angry side.
I never would have guessed that.
I don't like rules. I like variety. I like change. I like all of that, and so it was. He was very disciplined. And my dad was disciplined, so I saw connections between the two. But how he did it was unbelievable. He always did it with a smile on his face, and I could think of other words that I used to think of when he did it at the time. But since with it being a very pleasant podcast, I'll leave those out. But it taught me a lot about respect and respecting other cultures and respecting people and what they do and how they go about their business, and I was just amazed by this. So when I came to Canada, I was in a very multicultural school in Rexdale, Ontario, at the time, West Humber Collegiate, and there was every nationality under the sun in that school. So that was a big adjustment for me. So I was learning from everyone on a daily basis. Not in some cases not well, but
learning what not to do.
yeah, it certainly was. But that's what got me into coaching was this guy Sharif Tufik, and he stopped me from playing one night because they wanted to see somebody and else, and he said, just come by and stand next to me, and I didn't want to stand next to him because I wanted to throttle him, and then I realized it was another way of working with the people around me while not playing. It was, he just destroyed my universe. It was just a game, and he had taken it away from me on a Wednesday night. I was like, "You what?" So it was a valuable step, and it kind of started there at a young age, and so I mean things progressed along the way where you get yourself into different worlds that you know nothing about, and I didn't. I knew nothing about coaching, and many to this day would still say the same thing.
You walked right into that. You walked right into that one. That was right on the tip of my tongue. But that's fascinating, because I think that we'll talk about this in a second. But it's fair to say that you had a mentor from a young age who guided you into the direction of coaching. And I know that mentorship is something that you and I talk about daily, and how important that is. You're a product of Canada Soccer's coach education program, and you went through the process right up to the A license. What was that experience like for you? And what did you learn, and from who did you learn it along the way? I know that's a bit of a multifaceted question, but I know you'll take it in every direction. Tell us about the experience of going through that back in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s.
I don't know if I can recall all of it, but there's moments that you recall that when you start coaching, and I knew I had to get better at what I was doing, because I coaching now versus coaching 30 plus years ago, it doesn't look the same. It was completely different.
What's different about it?
Now it's more understanding. It's being more aware. It's what really pushed me to do what I'm currently doing now. It's more about listening and looking at what's going on around you, and learning from everyone around you, from a variety of platforms and forums and spaces, however you want to term it. It doesn't matter how you term it. It's the message that gets delivered, and I think once you do that you have an opportunity to lead, but until that point, you don't have the right to lead, because you haven't taken time to look at what's going on around you, or to listen to others, and thus you don't learn. And when I think way back then to when I first started, I think, whatever, getting into coaching, think of it as day one of a 365-day course. After day one, I think I must have quit 6 times, going, this is how you're supposed to coach? No, I'm not doing this. There's no way. So you take, a very direct approach of how you're being taught and how you're supposed to coach, and you try to apply it, and in your heart of hearts, this is not right. This doesn't feel right. I mean, it hurt. It stung. It really wasn't pleasant, and you try to mold yourself around what you don't like, and knowing what you have to do, or what you had to do at that time to get a license, to what we're asking of people now is quite different, and it's a bit of a clash of worlds, even though they're 30 years apart. It's been such a shift, that in all aspects, from just the human perspective, from an administration perspective, technology, expectations. There's a massive change in what we did, and so going through that process, you learn to grow and strengthen numbers. And when we did the B and A licenses, I think it was, this was Tony Waiter's phrase, it was easier to become a brains surgeon in Canada than it was to get an A license. And I thought, no way. Well, yeah, way. At that time, I was like, oh my God, I'm not. It was so difficult, and so challenging, and it made you tough. It made you very, very tough. To complete everything that you're trying to do. So for me, it was a challenge, and even within colleagues, there were some mentors along that way that get you through, and it really started in that sort of C license level with getting to know a little bit about Brian Rosenfeld, and working in the provincial program. And I think of things that I went through with Brian as a colleague, as a learner on a C license. I was just, my jaw was constantly hitting the deck, and I know we to this day we still remain good friends and colleagues, and we think back to some of the things that happened. You're like, wow, that if you do that today, we'd be torn and battered, and up one side and down the other, you find a little bit of solace in those relationships. But at that time, I had multiple people, Gary Miller, Ed McBride, Jim Canavan. They were all instructors on those courses. And through time, you got to meet a variety of people, and ultimately Ray Clark was the biggest mentor for me over a longer period of time, and that was when I had an opportunity to work at CSA under Ray and Holger at the time, and also attached to the women's and the men's program for me, which was exciting. And learn from Evan Pellerud at the same time. So I had a variety of sources that I would get on a daily basis outside of actually coaching, just what went on behind the scenes, and get to a variety of camps to improve. But that you take into the coaching courses, and you think, what was missing then is what we're trying to apply now. And what is missing now, we sometimes don't have access to get what we can to what's needed. and the things we were asking then were a bit unrealistic, because the majority would never get to coach a national youth team or get on a very detailed international tournament at that level. So now we have to adjust and change along the way.
It's the challenge that we all face, isn't it? We don't know what we don't know, and getting exposure to levels of the game that you would not otherwise see or interact with is crucial now. You mentioned a few names there. Brian Rosenfeld. We'll have Brian on for sure as a guest because he's someone that I played with. I played for Ed McBride, under 14 provincial team. And I'm not going to say what year because I can't remember, but it was a long time ago. Holger Osiek, obviously, one of the legendary coaches in Canadian soccer history. But Ray Clark is the one that stands out for me, because Ray was my coach as a 14/15-year-old under 15 provincial team, and he was coaching in the National Training Center back then. It was. And he was your predecessor in this role. 26 years he worked for Canada Soccer as a manager of coach education. I've yet to find someone in Canada who has a bad word to say about him. He was just and still is a wonderful human being. And what I learned from Ray over the years, I didn't realize that I learned from him until after he retired. And it is about that humanistic approach, treating people like a human being. I mean, even back then, we're talking 30 years ago, coaching was different. It was much more autocratic is probably a good way to put it, where the coach was the boss and you did what he told you to do. But Ray had a way about him to treat people with real care and support, and he valued everyone. How has that changed over the years? That the coach is now a facilitator of learning. He's not the font, or she is not the font of all knowledge, where they're going to give the player the knowledge when they're good and ready. It's now more about facilitating and the relationship that you build with your players. What have you experienced in that respect, Stu?
I experienced that the coaching courses never taught us that. And when I went through that process, working with, in this case, Ray, as you bring it to the forefront, I always watched what went on, and I learned from people that did things well and things that I wouldn't use and chose not to use, and there'll be things that I do that people won't use, and that's what keeps the game growing and develop. And I think now more so than before, there's an openness to learn from the players, and an understanding that the players need the ability to interpret a coach's ideas, and the coach has to give them that ability, whereas before, not necessarily like that. It is going to be this way, and controlled by an iron fist, and it works for perhaps a small period of time, maybe 10 minutes of a session, or a week, but it doesn't last, and it becomes real tiresome very, very quickly. So you have to have the ability to connect and understand the individual, and that's what I learned in my sort of coaching pathway for myself, was to be honest, and to listen, and not to throw people under the bus. And sometimes that can be a difficult challenge in itself, because you say something and think, oh, man, I can't really say this. Then just say that. Look, I can't. I'm following what we've all agreed upon, and this is what we're doing, and that's the way we're going. And you sort of toe the company line, but behind the scenes you've had a great opportunity to debate it. Well, I always provided that opportunity for the players in training, if we did any form of activities or sequences or games, I lay it out for the players, and they always they always asked questions, and initially it was very difficult to corral all the questions. But I learned that they were like that because they had been told everything from almost day one, and I'm just using that as a phrase more than anything. So I stopped giving them all the answers a long time ago. To solutions and ask them, what do you want to do? They would be looking at me, what? Aren't you supposed to tell us? But from their discussions and from a couple of weeks of just interacting with players, it allowed me to build my plan around what they wanted. And I never do things the same way. I adjust to what's in front of me, and that's what I learned along the way.
Yeah, it's one of the principles of transformational coaching, isn't it? And we'll absolutely talk about that in future and go into more detail on that. The program developed by Dr. Jean Cote and Dr. Jennifer Turnage, which is embedded into our coach education program. One of the things that we did when you first started was we came up with our own internal coach education vision, mission, and values. The vision is where we want to get to, how we want to, what the dream is, what's the ideal state. The mission is how we're going to get there. And then the values piece, I want to get your thoughts on the values, because it's an acronym that we use that spells out the word teach. So, walk us through that. What does teach stand for, and why is it important?
Well, I mean, I'll keep it as sort of brief as I can, but I felt that in the beginning we had to have something to fall back on, and to fall back on a set of values that we felt were important to what we were doing, and base every decision around that, so that if we were to make it any discussion that you and I might have on a daily basis, there's something to fall back on. And I always look at it to ensure that we are making the best informed decision towards this. So the idea of that supported everything behind it, and the acronym of TEACH was important because it's what we do, but it also leads into a teaching and learning environment which falls in line with our approach of creating everything safe and fun, and making sure that everyone's on the same page and has an input in what to be doing. But part of the acronym is to also show that we're trying to make a change, we're trying to make a difference, to do things differently. So teach fit in well in the sense of the interpretation of it being T for the transparency, E for excellence, A for accountability. You put me on the spot here. C for character, and H for humility. And the first one, it would just fit in because we want to be transparent about everything that we do and providing the information. And it's just to make it clear and concise and consistent with what we're trying to do. It doesn't mean that everyone's going to like it, but what it does show is that this is what we're doing, and this is how we're going to go about it. But you can make a difference by offering feedback towards it, and that kind of plays a part in our concept of the person, because it needs to be about that person. So in order to do that as a person, we need to be transparent. And if all of us are involved in the same program are transparent, then we show a sense of transparency with respect to coach education, with respect to Canada Soccer, and so on. So there's a deeper lying root of what we're trying to do, and to ensure that people have a part in that, and making sure that we're not saying we're excellent. We're not excellent. We're going to be excellent at what we do, but we're going to base that against world-leading organizations that are in the same focus we are, in the same area of coach education. And if we use them as guides, we can improve ourselves so that we can create our own form of being excellent at what we do, but focusing back to the individual. And I think that's important, because that makes each of us accountable for what we do. And then we turn that accountability back into our processes in coach education through Google Classroom of, here's the assignment, here's the task, here's the deadline, you're now accountable for getting this done. And putting that back on the individual in that sort of, in this case, an asynchronous environment. But we want to use all sorts of ways to get the message across. But we want everyone to have a confidence feel in us of what we do, because we are actually doing what we say we're going to do, and that's a big part of it. And if we get the right people involved, Jason, that's the character. We want to open up the doors to that. That's the important part. More people involved in what we do, and delivering a collaborative message, because we want everyone to improve our courses. Oh, have you thought about this? No, actually, that's I love that idea. Well, let's put that in place for the next module. Like, we want it to be instant, and want people to be recognized for the value that they have, and we need to show humility when we do that.
It's an ongoing evolution is probably the best way to put it, because we've got some great minds in this country, and we've come across them, and we'll come across more through the coach education program, through our interactions with clubs and coaches, and they will come up with ideas that none of us have thought of. And that humility piece is being able to put your hand up and say, hey, that's a great idea. Can we use that? Because ultimately, I think what we say, what our learning facilitators say at the start of every course is, we're here to learn from you just as much as you are to learn from us and from each other. So it's just going into it with that mindset that we're all here to get better for the benefit of the kids who play the game in our country. So as I expected, we've gone well over time, but I've got one more question that I have to get to, which is the transition to dealing with the COVID-19 situation and online learning. You and I and Jim Laughlin, one of our master coach developers at Canada Soccer, we had a conversation a couple of months back, certainly well before COVID-19 came on the scene. And I posed a challenge to the two of you to put your heads together to figure out what a fully delivered online coach education workshop would look like, either the children's license or the youth license, B license or A license. And I remember we had a reasonably heated discussion about it because I don't.
Which one was
that? Yeah, I know. There's been so many, but the premise was, well, that's not the ideal way to deliver it. But the reality is, we might not have a choice. This might be the only way that we can deliver this coach education to as many coaches as we want to educate in this country, because the feedback we were getting was that more and more people are craving the accessibility of online learning. Lo and behold, a global pandemic hits, and all sanctioned soccer is suspended for the foreseeable future, and we had to pivot very quickly. Tell us a little bit about what we've done in online learning, from the community stream through to the licensing stream, and how coaches can access that education.
Yeah, it has been an incredible time frame of activities around the world, across our country, and obviously our heart goes out to those affected by the pandemic, but also the recent tragedy in Nova Scotia. But for us, and how we've approached the online environment, it started with, hey, are you guys putting the community courses online now? We're like, and that's the God's honest truth. So
well, the backstory of that is there's been work going on for the best part of 18 months to transition the previous in-person community stream workshops to an online SCORM compliant module, to use some of the technical terminology, and that process is ongoing. But this was a very, very quick turnaround of, we need to get this done in the space of 2 weeks. Is probably a more accurate reflection of the reality.
Yeah, and obviously thanks to yourself and Jim, mainly Jim, for putting a fierce amount of work into getting this done, and then obviously the community courses are now being placed in with voiceovers and in an online environment through Google Classroom. That are now accessible for all the provinces. So hats off again to Jim Laughlin for getting that work completed, and working with Rob Shabai and understanding, some of the pitfalls that were in it, but again, all 4 courses are now available in Google Classroom for provinces to work from. So there's an opportunity for coaches to continue that. And the introduction of Google Classroom for us was over almost 18 months ago now, to work through and to become familiar with. And we were talking about this for the longest while, of the different ways of coach education and how to go about it, and how we could use our time better, and include in-person visits, video recording of games and training, and we actually spoke of, why don't we just do all of it? How do we break this up, that now a coach education program becomes quite exciting to do it? So we tried it with a handful of individuals through completing an A license, beginning an A license through video calls, Zoom calls and presentations and discussions, as well as in situ, in-person visits of watching coaches work over the course of a week, and actually watching them in their real environment and working with them and understanding what they're trying to do, and how they're going about it, and testing their own philosophies against themselves, saying, but yeah, this is what you believe in, so why are you not following it? Or on the other hand, I love the fact that you're sticking to your guns and allowing the players to interpret what you believe. And there was lots of opportunities to test that for myself over the last year, for sure. So we're taking the approach now, using the theory components of, in this case, our children's and our youth license online, and setting deadlines for watching videos and doing quizzes and submitting tasks that coaches have been asked to do on their own time, and putting the onus back on them, with some instruction. And I'll say that, some instruction, so that they can interpret it to suit themselves of how they're going to answer something. And that's been quite a rewarding process for us to see that happen. And there's still some glitches along the way that we have to manage, but it's an exciting process with the future looking quite different from what it looks like today. It's going to look different tomorrow, never mind today.
I think it's fair to say that online learning is here to stay, and it's going to be a component of our coach education program moving forward. So if you're a coach and you're at home and you're bored and you're missing your players and being on the pitch and enjoying the game, You can continue your coach education online. If you're working at the community stream level, you can go to your provincial or territorial website and register for one of the 4 community stream workshops there. If you're in the licensing stream, children's license, youth license, you can apply at canadasoccer.com to continue your learning in the safety of your own home. Stuart, we could talk for hours, but I know I'm already going to get my knuckles wrapped for going over time here. But it's been an enjoyable discussion. We will absolutely have to have you back on to talk more in depth about specific aspects of coach education. As always, thank you for your time. Much appreciated. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns about coach education, Stewart Neely is your man. So Stewart, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me, Jason. And again, congratulations to yourself and Brad for making this happen. Looking forward to others.
As always, in a conversation with Stewart Neely, there's a lot to unpack. It's probably a good way to put it. Brad, what jumped off the page at you? What stood out in that discussion with Stu?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to really enjoy getting to hear more about who Stu is and how he got to the place where he is. One of the things that stuck out for me, I mean, he talked about his mentor early days and his transition from player to coach. And I think that's a really important thing as we sort of look at the coaching community around the country, how many of our coaches are volunteer coaches and how they find their way into the game. He also talked a lot about the people he looked up to at the time, folks that are still very, very prominent in the game today. I can remember going to every session that I could possibly find Stephen Hart at, taking U17 girls or whoever, Danny Worthington, the Mike Huzzahs and Lewis Pages of the world. So I think it's just a really important thing for us to sort of recognize, and for our listeners to recognize, that those informal learning opportunities that arise from more senior coaches that are working in the game, to really get out and see how they're working with players, and see how, Stu talked about the changes from 30 years ago to today. Just see how the sort of coaching methodology is changing over time. So yeah, I think there's a lot of value in hearing from Stu and getting to know him.
Yeah, that informal learning is invaluable. It's a message that we try and deliver on our coach education workshops, which is formal learning, but it's not a destination. It's not a case of, well, I've got my license, now I know everything, I never have to learn anything. Hopefully the experience you have on one of the workshops now is such that it will pique your interest to want to learn more and seek out those informal learning opportunities. I've said many times that every opportunity I get to work with someone like John Herdman or Kenneth Heinemuller, I'm going to grab it with both hands, because I learned so much in those 1 week or 2 week experiences that you just can't replicate on a formal licensing course. But we didn't touch on things like mentorship in any real detail. We didn't talk about in situ learning. Last year, Stuart had sort of traveled around the country and done in situ evaluations and appraisals of coaches doing the A license. And one of the stops on the way was Calgary, where he worked with Tommy Wheeldon and Martin Nash at Cavalry FC. So there's so much more to cover in future episodes for sure. But I'm conscious of time, and I know we're long overdue here. But if next week's going to be a great episode as well, we're going to profile and speak with Mr. Dave Nutt, who's the manager of development operations at Canada Soccer and the man behind the club licensing program. So next week's episode will be all about club licensing. So if you have any questions about that, or if you want to send in any feedback or suggestions on future guests that you might like to hear from, or people in your community who are doing amazing work in grassroots soccer, Brad, where can people send that information to?
Yeah, reach out to us via podcast at canadasoccer.com, or comment on any of the places you find the podcast posted, or via our social media channels. Primarily, though, podcast at canadasoccer.com will get you through to us.
Brilliant. Brad, thank you very much. I mean, we've, like we said at the start, we've talked about doing this for a very long time. And the first one's always the most difficult. So we're up and running. We've got the ball rolling is probably the best way to put it. But to everyone listening, thank you for spending time with us. And we look forward to carrying on the discussion. Most importantly, stay safe, look after each other, look after yourselves, and be well. Thanks very much for listening. Take care.